With regional leaders as America looks to counter China's growing influence.
And I'm Gavin Ramshawn. Coming up on Sport Today in 15 minutes' time. It's drama on the final day of the English Premier League season. Can Manchester City retain the title with victory against Aston Villa, or will Liverpool?
Anthony Albanese has vowed to sweep aside his country's reputation for dragging its heels in the fight against climate change. Wildfires, bleached out coral reefs and flooding has made Australia a byword for climate-fueled disruption. Mr.
Message to the world that there is a change of government. There will be some changes in policy, particularly with regard to climate change and our engagement with the world on those issues.
Albanese wasted no time in saying that climate action, climate policies are going to take centre stage for his government. In his acceptance speech, he said that Australia could be a renewable energy superpower. It could be a leader in that. Is a country that has been on the front line of climate disasters, whether that be the bushfires of 2019-2020 or the catastrophic floods that have happened a couple of months ago. But it is also a country that is out fossil fuels. There are other things that the new Prime Minister will have to deal with, and that has to do with the engaging the rest of the world. He's going to be sworn in on Monday and then fly out to Tokyo to meet with President Joe Biden. But generally, you do see a shift, you do see a change in the way that he wants to do things. Earlier today, Anthony Albanese said, I want to see change. I want to see change in the way politics operates in this country. And I think this is a message from him, not just
Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Emperor Naruhito ahead of that Quad summit, where, along with Australia's new Prime Minister, he will also meet the leaders of India and Japan. Those meetings will be full of formalities, but before leaving for Japan, if a president or not, is it one scoop or two? And President Biden opted for the latter. So back there with another tub and chatting to some of the children of the service personnel.
In the Donbass, diplomacy feels a distant prospect. Russian forces are advancing towards the strategic city of Severodonetsk, trying to encircle the Ukrainian defenders. Heavy artillery and overwhelming force, which eventually won them the...
Russia sells nothing but war. It's only interested in expansion. Today it attacks Ukraine. Tomorrow it could attack any other country on the perimeter. Georgia, Moldova, and so on.
The North Crimea Canal, the part of it that supplies water to Crimea, has been blocked for years. But since the beginning of March, we've been supplying water to Crimea.
Here in the capital, despite Russian gains on the... Back in the Donbass, even amid the horror, people seem to find a moment to reflect and maybe pray for a peace that seems as far away as ever. Joe Inwood, BBC News, Kyiv.
As the food shortage increases around the world, scientists have drawn up a list of little-known plants that could be on the menu by 2050. At the moment, 90% of calories are derived from just 15% of crops. Of more than 7,000 edible plants worldwide, only 417 are widely grown and used for food. I've been speaking to Dr. Maribel Soto Gomez, who is a research fellow at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, here in London.
If one of them is not resilient to climate change, then we're going to be in trouble because we rely on them so heavily. And so what we propose is to diversify our food systems to rely on the very broad diversity of edible plants that's out there.
But how easy?
Up or not, and something that we have to keep in mind at the forefront is to make sure that the populations that already rely on these plants are still able to access these plants.
Okay, and for example,
its leaves can be used as fiber, but the important part is the underground bit that can be prepared into different kinds of bread. And we know that it's climate resistant, it's drought tolerant, and it could provide a very good
wheat supplies grain, sunflower oil and everything else. We're not really eating enough beans, are we, either? Legumes.
That's right. Well, so they're already, legumes are a very important source of high protein for vegetarians. And I think that they're going to become increasingly important.
Yeah, one country which is going to be looking to try and produce a lot more food, perhaps in very high temperatures, is Spain. No let up in the heat wave there, which is affecting Spain and Portugal. Temperatures 16 degrees Celsius higher than the average for May.
Found pressure from climate change, population growth and fractured supply chains. But might these shocks to our system actually be a catalyst for positive change?
We have to wake up and we have to feed the world. That's a big job.
Can farmers...
The debate keeps raging.
They're still the team to beat.
England's batting is weak.
It's going quite well.
Definitely a lot of disappointment.
The results keep coming.
What was going through your mind?
It was absolutely amazing.
My heart rate was up.
It's part of the game.
This is a really tasty tie.
It's one of a kind.
This is what
are you doing about it?
This question is without context.
What the turnout was, it was over 70%. You know how many seats your party got? 0, Mrs.
We failed to win seats, but we got more votes than previous election.
It's a risk you're taking.
I take risks every day.
This hotel, that time, it was the biggest hotel in Africa. 1963, the hotel closed because the liberation movement in Mozambique started to work actively.
With the latest news and results from around the globe. Sport Today.
From the BBC Sports Centre. Coming up on the programme, Chile's Mito Pereira is the man to catch in the US PGA. The surprise leader is 3 shots in front as the final day gets underway in Tulsa. We're live at the Etihad Stadium. Can Manchester City secure their 6th Premier League title in England? You can stay in the running on Sunday.
The start that I had, it's easy it could get away from me. I was just really proud of the way that I battled back and didn't really let it faze me.
Stake at the top and bottom of the division. Burnley or Leeds will get relegated. Spurs or Arsenal will qualify for the Champions League. And, of course, it's either Manchester City or Liverpool for the title. We'll get the latest from Anfield in a moment. But first, let's cross to the Etihad Stadium in Manchester and join
of matches. The City fans, as you can see, are starting to arrive here at the stadium. There's less than 2 hours now until kick-off. The fans, I think, are in pretty confident mood that they can do this. City have been so consistent in the league this season. Yes, there was a little bit of a wobble last weekend against Steven Gerrard, a former Liverpool legend, how you suspect he would like to get the result that would give Liverpool, his former team, the title. But City, as I say, the red-hot favourites. They've only lost once in the league since October. That gives you an idea of just how consistent.
Who is at Anfield for us. Patrick, great to see you. As always, how much hope can the fans have then of Liverpool for a title-snatching maybe occasion today?
Well, I think if you ask anyone around Anfield, Gavin, they'll tell you there is a bit of hope, maybe even a bit to do that part. The second part of the equation, of course, is what goes on in Manchester. And Liverpool fans are going to need plenty of battery on their phones to be able to check that score in Manchester to see what's going on. They'll be hoping that Steven Gerrard and his Aston Villa team can do them a big League final next weekend in Paris against Real Madrid on the brink of something really quite special. The quadruple, that's the EFL Cup, the FA Cup, the Premier League and the Champions League. If they pull that off, well, that is unprecedented in the history of English men's football.
You're in. The French side came into the game as underdogs against a Barca side that had lost just once in a season, which included a flawless La Liga winning campaign. Maz Farouki watched their 3-1 win.
So it's an 8th European title for Lyon, who underlined pretty early on the best honours, the very top honours in the European game and in the world game. But it is Lyon who are the champions of Europe again, and they have the chance to add the French league title to their collection next weekend. For Barcelona, this is just their second defeat in all competitions this season. Alexia Putellas, as well as the Lyon captain who lifted the trophy, Wendy Renard. And if they're in the kind of form that they showed tonight, that is going to be a really exciting tournament.
Maz Farouki there. Now, Bam Adebayo scored 31 points for the Miami Heat as they lost that there from Max Strus. And Adebayo had a great night too as the Heat take a 2-1 lead in the best-of-7 series. Game 4 is Monday night in Boston.
You have two really competitive teams that, it's creating that adversity.
Now, tennis fans have been arriving in their thousands on Sunday for the start of the 2022 edition of the French Open. The tournament is allowed to run in its full capacity with the 5,000-seat Philippe Chatrier forced errors from Jabeur. 3-6, 7-6, 7-5 the score. And that is just about it from us. Thanks very much indeed for watching. A reminder, of course, you can get all the latest from the build-up to those European football leagues, the finales of those leagues on the BBC Sport website, as well as the latest from the...
Hello there. Over the last 24 hours, we've seen some fairly heavy rain in Karnataka as well. The rain turning increasingly heavy and even torrential in places across the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Meanwhile, across Central Asia, think quite widespread sandstorms working their way across Afghanistan on Monday with poor visibility down to just in New Delhi, probably rising a little bit after a drop early in the week, up to about 40 towards the end of the week.
That's where experience counts. Having a global view really makes a difference, and shining a light on stories across the world gives our viewers another perspective. I love the pressure of being
best-known comedians. Now he's a wartime leader, lauded around the world. I'm Jonah Fisher, and I had a front-row seat to Zelensky's incredible journey. Zelensky, the making of a president, is on BBC World News.
Supply chains and exacerbated the rise in prices, leaving people on the edge of crisis. To find out more, join us for our Global Cost of Living series on BBC World News.
This week we're going to see what the seals can see.
Really?
Yes.
And what can they see?
An enormous turbine. This beast...
Oh, wrong room. And Zoe gets attacked by a giant Iron Man. Hello and welcome to another scenic Glasgow location. Well, Paul Carter's taken the plunge to find out.
No, this isn't some kind of sea monster, but an autonomous machine which aims to perhaps make working at sea that little bit safer. Now, at present, those facilities are often maintained by human divers, working in challenging and hazardous conditions. But here at Heriot-Watt University, they're developing underwater robotic solutions to help take the strain. And they've come up.
So the system that we have will continuously explore the unknown areas and see what comes next on the structure, but we can also suggest positions to it. It takes the images from
robot could cut costs. But robots may also solve a practical issue as wind power expands.
So in the future we're going to have not hundreds but tens of thousands of offshore wind farms.
If you've got 10,000 wind turbines to inspect, you don't have them. They don't exist. We're going to need to replace or change the way we do things so that we can have several pilots monitoring tens or hundreds of those vehicles. So we need small-scale robotic fleets that are able.
Fascinating is how autonomous robots like this could allow for further innovation, solving problems like the expansion of wind farms held back by the sheer practicalities of people. It's easy to imagine how undersea.
There's innovation. This is a boat with no people on it. Also known as an uncrewed surface vessel, which can take to the seas to inspect projects in far-flung locations which are difficult.
Stuff back via satellite to the guys in Aberdeen.
By deploying these types of vehicles, there's a potential to reduce fuel consumption by as much as 95% in comparison with conventional ones.
Autonomous vehicles.
The firm collects and analyses geological data at land and at sea.
We're also looking to expand our fleet. This is obviously the Fugro Orca being the first of a fleet of 3 or 4 that we expect to have by the end of this year.
From the sea, it's actually a big structure underneath that goes to the seabeds and attached there. So we'll be looking at fixings to the seabed, the metal structure itself. They're all connected with power cables, so we'll also inspect power cables, make sure they've not been damaged by fishermen.
Safer and more sustainable future for essential work that needs to take place out at sea.
That was Paul and Shona all at sea.
Now, with more and more tech being used above and below the water, I see some technology that's trying to find out if new tidal turbines are harming sea life in their homes.
The challenge ahead.
It's absolutely terrifying, yeah, because this thing's going to go down.
So how do we protect them whilst quenching our thirst for clean energy?
Tidal has a role. The wind doesn't always blow, tidal always keeps going.
Perhaps this monitor is the answer.
Barnacles on there?
Those are barnacles on there.
So barnacles on it. So this one's already been underwater?
This has been in the water for about 2 years. This turbine does get barnacle growth on it, and then that becomes food for fish. During slack tide, there are fish around these turbines.
Between Orkney and the north coast here, we'd have had about 9,000 harbour seals, and unfortunately over the last 10-15 years we've lost about 85% of those animals. Oh yeah, we have one see on the end of the slip animals coming relatively close to the turbines, but it's really that fine scale behaviour that we're really interested in. What do animals do when they really come close to the turbines?
To answer this unknown, sinking a monitor next to a
pick up the sounds of porpoises and dolphins.
I've also noticed this Douglas.
Yeah, then there is the great umbilical cable. So the optical fibres that are bringing the data ashore are actually about as thick as a human hair.
Wow. The monitor will be sunk underwater and installed on the seabed next to the turbine.
When it's connected, the signal will run through underwater cables to this substation here.
This is a test deployment we did.
Test. Inside the substation, Douglas and Gordon are waiting to see if it's going to work more permanently.
Douglas, 5 years in the making, how are you feeling at this point?
A little bit nervous, as always. You know, we test and test and test.
Drawn onto the seabed because of tidal conditions.
But there's a delay. The turbine must be installed first, but a problem is holding things up.
They haven't deployed our equipment yet, but it will happen today for sure.
Plugged into a subsea hub. This will give the sea mammal monitor power, and this is a crucial moment. Is it going to connect? Is it going to switch on? And after years in the making, it's not good news.
Could not be happier. So we're all overjoyed, we're collecting data, and we hope to carry on collecting data for the next year. Touch wood.
You feel so sad. You just want to make the painting for him. Sorry.
Fluid, dynamic, androgynous, he's now at the forefront of a new generation of
Bring arts and culture on BBC World News.
None of this is real. The grass, There are 48 cameras in this room tracking my every move. This studio's already been used by the Royal Shakespeare Company to create a digital production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. With traditional motion capture, you consider using it professionally.
Sustainability, for example, I was due to give a keynote address to University of Michigan. Normally I would have flown over there, but now I'm doing it from our Smart Stage facility here. So that's a significant carbon saving over flying just on that one flight alone.
Are you really fighting a fire if you can't feel the heat? This Tesla suit, no relation to the car, aims to fix that with dozens of sensors that can be programmed to make your skin tingle in every sense. There's one here in Portsmouth, although it's not yet ready for me to try.
Right, Tuong. There's still limited amounts of content, right? In that sense, it's like subscribing to a cable's TV service and only having 3 channels available. And even if you're really excited about those 3 channels.
Oh, wrong room.
And apparently Zoe's still trying to find her way out. And that's the thing about this latest generation of immersive tech. It really is immersive, isn't it?
Yes, we've both gotten lost in a on anything.
The National Theatre in London has long been one of the city's best respected stage venues. But now, here at its studio, it's also been working hard on its digital offerings.
It's opened up a whole new genre of entertainment. The idea that the same show can be watched at the same time anywhere in the world in a variety of formats depending on what kit you have available to you. So that could be in
smartphone anyway, and you can rest it on a table and then just flip it a bit for the right angles.
For me, it did feel more natural and engaging in its original VR format, though.
I definitely feel more immersed here.
Set around her, and we then process that through some technology that allows us to create a 3-dimensional hologram of her performance. And from that one asset, we then put that into that experience. It's not quite the same, it doesn't feel the same. And then the desktop experience, which I think we can all see sort of plays really as a sort of enhanced screen.
The idea here is about being able to democratise many people do, or a great phone, but you do have a decent computer or laptop, then maybe you want to watch it on one of them, and you'll still have the ability to make it immersive, to be able to move around the space.
Take a look at my spice rack. I think what we're exploring here is most definitely a new future. It's not the new future. We will never ever replace live performance on stage. However, with the technologies that are available and with the expectations is for us to be able to bring National Theatre to new audiences in new ways.
So whilst the aim here is far from replacing theatre, it might just add something extra and an experience that can be
The Russian invasion of Ukraine. Headlines as they happen with breaking news alerts in the app, and get the full story with bbc.com/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.
Experiences builds knowledge, boosts confidence, and inspires action. Media shines light on people's realities, ignites conversation, raises questions, and demands answers. International charity, sparking imagination, sparking determination, and sparking climate action. Support our mission. Follow us now.
We had severe thunderstorms across eastern areas of Canada yesterday that knocked out power supplies to quite a lot of people. Now, we are looking at the risk of further severe thunderstorms for Quebec and the northeast of the United States, with damaging gusts of wind and some large hail mixed in as well. Storms with hail and damaging gusts of wind. We've seen torrential rain in Durban. Over the last 24 hours, 202 millimetres of rain has fallen. We could see another 100 to 150 millimetres of rain or so, with the threat of some nasty flooding and dust to contend with. Now, the Mayo front will bring some heavy rain across southern areas of China, the north of Vietnam, and we continue to see enhanced rainfall across Thailand and also Myanmar, with the threat of flooding. Could see another 100 to 150 millimetres.
And it's interesting with Russia, when you live in a time when people cannot tell fact from fiction, when lies actually spread faster than facts.
I understand, but will answer. They can kill us, and they will also die. I can't understand for what.
When big names talk, they talk to the BBC.
Influence.
Was he saying that Australia could become a renewable energy superpower?
Obviously, the Quad Leaders meeting is an absolute priority for Australia, and it enables us to send a message to the world that
or it could be a leader in that field. And whether or not he forms a majority or a minority government with a coalition, he will have to work with Green MPs and the independents who've put climate action as the center of their campaigning. And I think it was a message for those areas as well that this is not going to happen overnight, that there's going to be a plan to phase out fossil fuels. There are other things that the new Prime Minister will have to deal with, and that has to do with the engagement. You do see a shift, you do see a change in the way that he wants to do things. Earlier today, Anthony Albanese said, I want to see change. I want to see change in the way politics operates in this country. And I think this is a message from him, not just for Australians.
To begin the latest leg of his Asian tour. He was welcomed by the Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi and the US Ambassador to Japan, Rahm Emanuel, used to be the mayor of Chicago. Mr. Biden is scheduled to meet. Concessions would backfire because Russia would only escalate attacks in the future. From Kyiv, Joe Inwood gave us the latest.
In the Donbass, diplomacy feels a distant prospect. Russian forces are...
Russia sells nothing but war. It's only interested in expansion. Today it attacks Ukraine. Tomorrow it could attack any other country on the perimeter. Georgia, Moldova, and so on. There is no other formula but to subdue.
Invasion has got it flowing again.
The North Crimea Canal, the part of it that supplies water to Crimea, has been blocked for years. But since the beginning of March, we've been supplying water to Crimea.
Here in the news, Kyiv.
Experts at the World Health Assembly are meeting in Geneva. One of the items on the agenda is monkeypox. The rare viral infection is usually only found in parts of West and Central Africa. It's beginning to spread worldwide.
We do know from reports from Africa, where this disease has circulated in outbreaks over many years, that there are certain individuals who are much more at risk of severe disease, particularly immunosuppressed individuals or young children. In adults, we think it's really want clinicians to be alert to it and send the test if they're concerned. From the point of view of the general population, I think the important things that we talk about regularly, if you're feeling unwell, stay at home and avoid contact with others. If you develop a rash, immediately seek medical care.
Over the last 24 hours, we've seen some fairly heavy rain across southern India's Tamil Nadu, with 100 millimetres of rain falling in one or two areas. Now, looking at the weather picture at the moment, we've got a number of showers feeding into Kerala and Karnataka. Some of those are likely to be quite heavy from It's Hamilton that will see some of the heaviest falls of rain, but still some wet weather in Karnataka as well. The rain turning increasingly heavy and even torrential in places across the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Meanwhile, across Central Asia, I think quite widespread sandstorms working their way across. Showers and thunderstorms across northern India could bring some hail in places as well. Now here's your outlook over the next few days. In Mumbai, we're dry. Temperature about 33 degrees with hazy spells of sunshine. Temperatures in New Delhi probably rising a little bit after
feeling here now that nowhere is safe.
Страшно, когда мины летят, кто его знает, там в огороде у нас взрывалось. И этот свист еще.
Was now facing down the world's second most powerful army.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In-depth programming on BBC World News.
Instagram.
In that way.
I think comes a point when you just aren't in control of it anymore, and then it took on a life of its own.
We're facing one of the fundamental conflicts is how intense the problems are, because teenagers are killing themselves because of Instagram.
This challenge of making Instagram feel less pressurized, I think is very difficult, if not impossible.
In girls because of their gender is the most extreme form of gender-based violence, but in many countries no records kept of the number of cases. Now on BBC World News, BBC 100 Women meets two women working to identify femicides and obtain justice for victims.
Sağlayana kadar mücadeleye devam edeceğiz biz.
Creemos en la memoria y la justicia y eso solamente se hace si seguimos nombrándolas. El momento que no las nombremos, entonces sí caerán en el olvido.
Solo nos pasan matando a las mujeres.
Femicide, the killing of women and girls because of their gender, is a global problem. Every 11 minutes, a woman was killed by her partner.
Kuruldu diyebilirim. Onun sonrasında benzer düşünen kadınlar bir geniş çağrı yaparak tüm kadınlara, kadın örgütlerine platform kurma.
And her team found themselves taking on the role of investigators.
İlk mektup da Siirt'te Esin Güneş diye bir öğretmen genç kadının Tillo kayalıklarının dibinde cansız bedeni bulunmuş ve kocası intihar ettiğini, Esin'in düşme ihtimalinin %0 olduğu fiziken kanıtlanınca şüpheli tutuklandı ve ilk defa savcı olması gereken mütalayı artık cinayet olarak verdi. Bizim biliyorum ben.
We Will Stop Femicide is run by a group of volunteers. The most recent of the team's cases to conclude was Yağmur Onut, a university student who was shot in the neck in 2016. Had been murdered. She contacted We Will Stop Femicide for help.
Yani mahkeme bir şakadan bahsediyordu. Yani şakalaşma sonucunda bu ölüm gerçekleşmişti. Yağmur bir genç kız olarak bütün bunlara bakmanız gerekiyor. Ama bunu kanıtlamak için 6 yıl mücadele etmek gerekti.
It wasn't until January this year that her then boyfriend Egemen Vardaş was finally convicted of killing with eventual intent.
Bunlarla iç içeyken ailelerle de iç içe olmanız gerekiyor. Ailelere hem dosyadaki aşamaları anlatmak gerekiyor. Hem onların acılarını anlamak gerekiyor. Onlar bir travma yaşıyorlar ve siz...
Tabii sadece kurşunla onu almıyorlar, sizi de öldürüyorlar ama sizin ölmek gibi yani bir yatağa yatıp günlerce orada kalmak gibi, ağlamak gibi, üzülmek gibi.
Bir de böyle iyi insanların olduğunu görünce diyorsun ki iyilik kazanacak bir gün.
The Turkish authorities have begun releasing data on the number of women murdered in the country. But Gülsüm says
the last decade, the Americas have seen a 9% increase in gender-related killings of women and girls by an intimate partner or family member. 18 countries
anual y ellas escribían en cuadernos, hasta ahora escriben en cuadernos los casos de todo el país, ¿no? Y entonces con ellas también nos juntamos en el 2017 y dijimos, bueno, juntémonos y hagámoslo mejor, de mejor manera, más organizada, más sistemática, de forma que podamos pelear. Las compañeras nos reportan inmediatamente cuando ocurre un femicidio.
The group then begins to investigate, tracing the woman's last movements and establishing whether she had previously been a victim of domestic violence, so as to include her in their
de la memoria de las víctimas. Damos un paso más todavía. Ya no solo es mapear los números, es mapear las rutas de la vida, las rutas vivas de las víctimas.
Sin la canción, sin el latir de tu precioso corazón.
After the 10th stab wound.
Pero el mapa nos permite ver no solamente la muerte, sino la vida. Nos permite escuchar audios de sus hijos, de sus hijas, de cómo era Maribel en vida. Nos permite mirar lo que sienten ahora, que su mamá no está con ella.
Que ella se fue y no regresó más. Peor yo, que estaba sola, que tenía que avisarle a mi papá, a mi hermano y no sabía cómo. Se me hacía muy duro.
Miriam helped.
Siempre pasábamos ahí, encontrábamos cualquier amigo y nos poníamos a conversar, o cualquier persona, conversábamos, íbamos a comprar para la merienda o para el almuerzo. El mapa para mí significa que...
last year.
¿Por qué era un femicidio? Y porque es evidente, fueron 113 puñaladas. Eso significa misoginia, eso significa una relación de poder, significa que ella estuvo sometida. Eso es femicidio, es la definición del femicidio. Mesón en la conciencia y decir, bueno, vamos a hablar de este tema. No es que alguien nos está pagando y nos financia, ¿no? Simplemente por voluntad frente a la ola de femicidios que hubo en el Ecuador en el 2017.
Tiene que tener un alto ya.
The true scale of the problem continues to be uncovered by women like Gulsum and Geraldina around the world.
Pero la violencia solo perdura en el silencio y el femicidio va a seguir mientras sigamos en silencio.
Kadınlar işte.
Ahead. From being one of the leading gear manufacturers in Asia with a pan-India and global network, we continue to get a step closer to our customers.
That's Elecon at 70.
Elecon, celebrating 70 years of excellence.
As we face the world's greatest from around the globe to bring you incredible insight with a reduced carbon footprint. Future Planet, solutions for a sustainable world.
On the Belarusian side, migrants started throwing rocks.
From where I'm standing now, you can hear the sound of shooting and explosions.
This is a storm that has now claimed at least 14 lives overnight. You had people rushing to their basements.
We break stories from more places than any other internet.
In My Greatest Shot.
If you pay attention enough, there's still
My name is Charlie Waite, and I'm a land important, I think, for many people, is to ensure that it conveys what they felt. And it's a bit old hat now, but you don't photograph what it looks like, you photograph what it feels like. If one finds a landscape just a series of parallel lines, and then I realized that I needed some event. I needed some little thing to happen. And way over on my right-hand side, I saw a few cows, and then I saw more cows. There was a fleeting moment where I thought this was just sublime. It is a huge emotional experience to get it right, because it has been a process, the camera being a conduit. The clouds that are not in your photograph are often more useful than the ones that are, because the thing that you can, up to a point, control is the movement of the sky. Right now, this will pass, it's changeable, it's completely vague. There are no molecules of dust in the air at all for about 10 minutes. So that sharpness of light is thrilling. It does look like over there the clouds might be coming this way, and I'm hoping that in 10 to 15 minutes, the geometry, we've got the relationships, we've got the depth. As that light comes down, it'll be very nice indeed. I photograph using a Hasselblad. It's an old one. Make a decision to not just point the camera and hope for the best. Come back 2 or 3 times, maybe stay there an hour or 2, or maybe only 5 minutes. And I think once you've got a disciplined way of seeing, the result will be... My favorite recent photograph is the Rock of Gibraltar, because of the difficulties and the frustrations associated with the production. I like southern Spain a lot, and Gibraltar, it's a big hunk of a rock. Yes, I did want them, so I completely turned around my entire approach, and I realized that actually I wanted the person in because they had a yellow plastic bag. And this very strong, if you like, architectural relationship between Gibraltar, the yellow wall, 5 years to make happen. And I finally was gifted this relationship. The geometry was really the story behind the whole photograph, I think. That diagonal and pressing print, and it literally is delivered into your hands, and it's a really lovely experience. It takes a little while to fire up. Yes. These days, produce an image as vibrant as this, as a print, but you can come very, very close to it. Colour can be, I think, pretty much matched. And when I make my print of the Rock of Gibraltar, the yellow is as yellow with it. Especially when seen under daylight light. Absolutely over the moon. It's one of the boldest photographs I think I've ever done. I personally didn't think that this huge any light. Had it done so, I never would have seen this photograph. It will continue to have a long-term effect on me. And in fact, what I learned from there is that it's okay to be brave and step away from your...
Wallonia, a way of life.
Kenya.
This is our world.
I just seen the cops kill somebody.
A series of documentary films that reveal the human drama at the heart of global events.
If I'm in jail, I'm living my life meaningfully.
Posits a very certain look, almost like a sort of Picasso cubist rendering of a still life. The end result appears almost as if it was applied with a brush rather than being made with a camera. I knew that going to say it's probably the one aspect of this way of shooting that brings me the most joy. Really all I'm doing is layering image upon image upon image and seeing what the result is. And it just renders the colours and shapes and tones that we see before us in a very, very different way. White of the sky into the foreground. I was very effectively able to cut out some of the detritus in the foreground and get a very, very clean composition. Success is to keep the composition fairly simplified. So with a 70 to 300mm lens, I can sort of zoom in, get rid of all the rubbish going on outside. Most cameras have the ability to make multiple exposure images using a variety of different blend modes. When I'm just fragile they are, how delicate. I'm going to try shooting in dark mode, which is going to duplicate the dark. Let's just see what happens. And I'm going to overexpose my first image by a considerable amount because I know that I can go That's how far I've got in the process. So that was the last one that I put down. Obviously, it's going to get busier and busier. So I could now try and put another image perhaps on top just to get a little bit of depth. I'm going to change my white balance just to see what happens and go in again. White balance and exposure compensation. As you work through the series, you can speed up the shutter and put down some sharper elements. And this is what's so great about this approach. The sky is the limit, really, with all the options. Oh, actually, that's quite interesting. All of it was shot. If you want more of a guarantee that you're going to get something decent at the end of it, then this is really not going to suit you. I suppose it's the constant failures and the challenge of being able to crack it. That's what keeps it interesting for me. My greatest shot would be Blossom Blizzard. I'm very, very inspired by springtime. It's a positive, happy time. And obviously, the trees and something that's bright and contrasty with good tonal separation. And this tree, it sort of had it all, really. The white blossom against the dark tree is a perfect vehicle for this because I can move the camera around and all of a sudden I probably came back with, I don't know, maybe 300 images. These are really just the ones that I haven't deleted. This blossom is much, much brighter than the dark green. By repeating the shot and moving the camera to the trunk of the tree in the process, so that image is really not going to go anywhere. This one is perhaps more successful. I've managed to duplicate the blossom quite nicely. You can still see a suggestion of the trunk there. That one, you can see there's softness there, and then I blizzard image. This is how it arrived into Lightroom, and that is what I've applied to this image. So you can see it's a very, very different look. I will probably go in and play around with the colours a little bit and see what happens. I'm really keen on changing as I feel I want to. And then I might go up to the white balance and see what happens if I play around with that. And you can see that the colours in the final image are now starting to emerge because I'm taking it to the blue end of the spectrum. This was the colourway that I ended up with. File and then send it to my printer, press Command P, and it'll come off the printer 1,000 times, all identical. It seems to me that the hand of the artist, for want of a better phrase, is missing. So I've been looking at ways to hand finish my images. Spring is just lovely. It sort of comes along just at the right moment, I think. So you go out with a sort of happy disposition, and I suppose I think that comes through in the image. This confetti-like cascade of blossoms. And it certainly doesn't suit everybody. It doesn't even suit most people to shoot like this. It's a complete reversal of what we've all been taught as photographers, really. I have to say, what I really like about this way of photography is it attracts the rule breaker to play with their camera.
What he saw and what he went through, it makes me feel so sad. You just want to make the painting for him. Sorry.
Fluid, dynamic, androgynous, he's now at the forefront of a new generation of...
Hello there. Let's take a look at some of the weather headlines affecting the globe then. Starting off in Australia, some heavy rain is expected through Perth for the start of the new week, but showers easing across that Queensland coastline. Got some very intense rainfall, which could lead to some localised flash and some stormy weather conditions moving through humid air across the far southeast of North America. Behind it, somewhat quieter and cooler conditions to follow on.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
I'm cool, chill your bill.
And it's interesting with Russia, when you live in a time when people cannot tell fact from fiction, when lies actually part of my Asian culture with me into everything I do.
Yeah, they can destroy us, but we'll answer. They can kill us, and they will also die. I can't understand for what.
When big men...
This hotel, that time, it was the biggest hotel in Africa. 1963, the hotel closed because the liberation. And now more than 2,000 people are living there, but in the really, really hard condition.
Watch more stories like this at bbc.com/real.
Leaders there as America looks to counter China's growing influence. Set to be sworn in as Prime Minister on Monday before he heads to Tokyo for a meeting with the leaders of the US, Japan and India. Ahead of that meeting, he signalled a shift in climate change policy, saying Australia could become a renewable energy superpower.
That climate action, climate policies are going to take centre stage for his government. In his acceptance speech, he said that Australia could be a renewable energy superpower. It could be a leader in that field. And whether or not he forms is going to be difficult. But Anthony Albanese has called for change, has called for safe change, and I think it was a message for those areas as well, that this is not going to happen overnight, that there's going to be a plan to phase out fossil fuel. And that has to do with the engaging the rest of the world. He's going to be sworn in on Monday and then fly out to Tokyo to meet with President Joe Biden, to meet with the leaders of Japan and India in the Quad meeting. He indicated earlier how important that is going to.
And days of flooding and landslides in parts of Bangladesh and eastern India have affected millions and left more than 50 people dead. Bangladesh's northeast region has seen some of the worst flooding for nearly 20 years. The two countries are prone to flooding. Says that Joe Biden has congratulated Anthony Albanese on his victory in Australia. The two men will be meeting face-to-face on Tuesday at the Quad Summit in Japan. President Biden has arrived now in Japan after flying in from South Korea to begin the latest leg of Japan. Those meetings will be full of formalities, of course. Just before leaving for Japan, though, Joe Biden had a slightly more relaxed time as he brought his trip to South Korea to an end. He spent some time with US service personnel in the countries and their families.
We've seen some fairly heavy rain across southern India's Tamil Nadu, with 100 millimetres of rain falling in one or two areas. Now, looking at the weather picture at the moment, we've got a number of showers feeding into Kerala and Karnataka. Some of those are likely to be quite heavy from this cloud you can see here. Visibility down to just a few hundred metres in places. The heat wave is easing across Pakistan and the northwest of India as the breeze picks up. Again, there'll be some areas of lifted dust or even a few sandstorms blowing in here. But rather than temperatures being in the low 50s to about 40 towards the end of the week.
ये मेरा चीज है.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine continues, and so do the attacks on the south and east of the country.
This attack happened while the Secretary-General of the United Nations was in Kyiv.
But once again, it's civilians who are the casualties.
There's still no...
ourselves, this is all part of the same story.
Piece the story together with Ros Atkins, Outside Source on BBC World News.
Crowned champions, but overshadowed by a bloody war.
Edge of crisis. To find out more, join us for our Global Cost of Living series on BBC World News.
With prices soaring, a shortage of workers and warnings of recession, world leaders are gathering in Davos, and the meeting's founder tells me how they can fix the problems. And the head
I have like some notes on my leaving speech on Instagram. It says, I joined 3 years ago as the first international employee based out of London. I couldn't imagine leaving our community in better hands. I've met kind of crazy that you have all these things in here, you know? I'm like, a little trip down memory lane. My name is Hannah Ray. I worked at Instagram as a community manager for Europe, Middle East and Africa.
is Andy War. I was the head of research there. My name is Chris Messina, and I am best known for inventing the hashtag. It's a little hard to see, but I've got a little hashtag tattoo right here on my wrist. So, yeah.
Instagram could be having a harmful effect on many teenagers.
For some young people, it's a much, much darker place.
She's the former Facebook employee turned whistleblower whose revelations are reverberating around the world.
The company's leadership knows how to make.
I didn't feel like that was the best use of people's time. We don't fully understand what the consequences of this period will be.
This is just the beginning. And the thing that I think young people see, that maybe people a little bit older than them don't, is how intense.
It was quite a jump. It was something that I wasn't really mentally prepared for. I was quite anxious because every day I had to then please thousands more people than usual. I was on Instagram all the time.
Better understand how to build and deploy AI responsibly. If you want to understand why Instagram is the way it is, you have to understand how the algorithms have shaped it to be that way. They are the result of people's choices.
The goal of any social media company is saying yes or no to something. What people often think about how social media feed systems work is that they're one algorithm, and that somebody sits down and writes that algorithm and says, if you have 2 photos of machine learning models, the way that the hundreds of machine learning models interact with each other is determined by the overarching metric that guides the feed ranking system. In Instagram, and so interactions from the people closer to you tend to be prioritized above interactions from people who are further out in that network from you.
What Instagram is looking to do is keep you engaged in some way.
This is how content is targeted to different individuals, what choices they made to go down certain paths, and that lack of awareness is where we're the most vulnerable.
I've always had problems with food, of looking and comparing myself to other people had on my mental health, and my eating disorder got worse over the years.
I think the thing that's fun things with your friends, Snapchat is about faces and augmented reality. You know, it's not actually you, it's you with a mask on. Facebook's internal research says that Instagram is about bodies and about social comparison. You know, it's about seeing these little windows in other people's lives and comparing for the content that will lure you in. These algorithms are always looking for the rabbit hole that you are most vulnerable to, because you can start with quite innocuous interests. You know, you can search for healthy eating. These rabbit holes normalize the idea that you should be extremely
busy with work, that I just put it off for as long as possible. And I feel like that's kind of like the sense of self-harm of having an eating disorder. It's just basically starving yourself. I thought if I changed myself and did this, then this would be the outcome. And it was a lie.
There were things that we were aware of that we would feed back. The hashtag thinspo has just popped up and it should probably be banned.
At the time, we honestly didn't really have a clue how big it was, how much it was growing. I would go to many concerts. As people were taking photos of their time at the show.
Instagram's brand was about covering how bad the cameras were in the phone the other day. They were very pixely. So how do you make a great photo, put a nice heavy filter on it that makes it something else? It's not supposed to be.
At Instagram. It was like the most followed account in the world. I think it still has a bigger circulation than the New York Times. Like, it was a hugely kind of impactful real estate to share someone's story. And whenever we would share someone's story on there, quite often you were on the community team of how big it was going to get.
This world that Instagram had created, where you could present your life as more beautiful and interesting than it actually was, where you could see Zuckerberg wanted to make sure that he got to Instagram before any of his competitors did, and that he made sure that they joined Facebook. So he offered them $1 billion, which is more than any.
And they made an offer to acquire us. At this moment, I think what goes through my head and what goes through everyone else's head, I believe, is the next sentence will be, and we rejected them. And then the very next thing Kevin says is, and we accepted and we signed. I remember, and I think that's what everyone felt. This idea that like this ride that we're on, this roller coaster of being in control of our own destiny, growing this small little thing that we've been working on our own was like,
if this is ultimately going to be the best thing for this community.
Facebook has tried over and over and over to make a product that will appeal to young people. They had these labs that were churning out new kinds of apps to possibly create a new...
Previously, success for us meant that we built a good product, that like the things we worked on were doing really well, that like people using them felt good about them. Shifting from that mindset to something where success is just measured by numbers in a very plain way.
Brands onto the platform. Now looking back, what I've seen or what I've realized is with the launch of ads and brands on the platform, this kind of tension or friction was created between brands that were almost trying to act like individuals.
Such thing as influencing. I come from a modeling background. A few years later than that, Instagram came about, and obviously you like to take pictures, it's a picture app. So from my modeling history, I was like, okay, great, this is for me. I was very consistent with Instagram and I enjoyed it. Like you get...
Where some people are doing like full-on BMW ads and it's not genuine to who they are as a person, because I know that person. They don't drive a BMW. The core of Instagram, as I remember it, was just, here's what's happening. But if what's happening...
I decided to get fake followers. I can't remember what the package was. It wasn't even that much. I think I paid like maybe like £100. And it basically was like, I got 3,000 likes on each picture. And then I think I gained like 10,000 followers.
On what's called the fake engagement team. I also conducted work on Instagram. Back in late 2019 and early 2020, roughly 10% of follows on Instagram were fake. This is a very rough estimate. Because Instagram has more room to grow. This created a dynamic in which there was more resistance to integrity measures on Instagram than I personally saw on Facebook.
Facebook is a public company, Instagram is part of it, and
when Instagram introduced advertising, it was obviously better for people to spend more time in the app, because more time in the app.
Trademarks of Instagram when I first joined was that your feed would be in chronological order. But as the platform became more saturated, what we were finding is that more and more people weren't able to actually see a lot of the content that they followed. It became
the algorithm, and they would compare these through A/B tests to see which was performing better. There was, amongst some users, a negative perception of this. However, you look to the metrics, like our engagement metrics, like those that you may never have discovered otherwise unless the algorithm recognizes something about your behavior. But at the same time, depending on the nature of your interests, the things that you might get shown may or may not lead you down certain paths, and that can lead to some, I think, both like scary places.
A good 4 years I've been associated with these anti-recovery Instagram communities. I probably wouldn't have known what self-harm was if I didn't look on them accounts.
So, sitting in front of your phone for hours and hours a day, I would make friends on Instagram. There'd be these like accounts, put a sad quote and they'd put it in with like sad, to you like them, then people often follow you if you like them, and then you follow them, and then you get sucked into that community.
The kinds of problematic content I remember being surprised by, block accounts. So it was a little bit of hunting through and just like being proactive and reactive to the stuff that was happening. Dealing with problematic content was something that Facebook was able to help quite a bit learn and deal with those problems in much bigger numbers than we ever had. I remember that was actually one of the big benefits that we saw looking at Facebook, being like, oh wow, they can actually really take this off our shoulders.
By offload is to have as few humans involved in that process as possible, and to prioritize the issues that are getting the most public attention, which are the issues mostly facing Facebook, not the issues facing Instagram.
Content moderation happens in algorithms often struggle to take into account social nuances that might determine whether something is problematic or not. Even if your AI for detecting harmful content is 99% accurate, if people are posting 1 million bad things a day,
glamorized, and it's meant to be like people make it look good. Like everything on Instagram's glamorized, whether it's the positive life and going shopping, having loads of money, or self-harm.
What happens is you're handed a particular leaflet, and then how you react to that leaflet determines which leaflet you're handed next. Once you start down a particular route through that square, the leaflets that you see are going to be more and more related to each other, and that might be a good thing. Determination to give the ranking model the same signals consistently over time that you are not in fact interested in that thing that you were interested before, and it'll test to see if you're still not interested in them, and if you
You got everything? Yeah.
It's hard to manage. It's a big problem. Abby can get very distressed. She's been
to understand the dark corners of Instagram that are harder to look for if you don't know what you're looking for. The hashtag communities that exist. If you don't know the right hashtag, you might never find them. So it's very easy for
them to sort themselves out. I'm sure that there was some vague awareness perhaps about that risk in the early days of social media. In some ways, I don't want to say we were blinded by ambition, but blinded by the desire to just kind of get this stuff.
In your comments that make you sad, blocking certain people from following you, making sure that you can't see likes on others' posts. Well, hiding it doesn't make it go away. You are still in this world where everyone is being compared to everyone else.
Soothe by scrolling on Instagram. The only problem is if your self-soothing technique, sitting and scrolling, is exposing you to more of the content that is making you sick, that's not a good coping mechanism.
a little harder to understand is they will actually change your own behavior over time by showing you certain things.
If I'm scrolling 13 hours a day, it kind of no wonder that it had a negative effect on my mental health.
That there's some sense of like this image has been doctored. I think it's our responsibility to tell people that.
During COVID, I made friends with a neighbor, and I then got help from there. Right, I'm filming now, and I'm not stopping it. I've stopped this video about 100 times.
I don't know if it's an unusual thing about the nature of work as an influencer, but there are no built-in protections. You're competing with literally millions of people on a scale that most humans have never had to confront before. Imagine constructing your way at a certain rung on a ladder, that if you stop doing that and you'll lose all of your self-worth and you'll start to question your value. It's a really tough place to be in.
It's in the very structure of Instagram that these problems have come about. And so if you
promote whether they're profiting from things that they shouldn't be. A big part of Instagram's business model is that it has an understanding of what users are interested in, and what it says to advertisers is put your advertising on our platform and we'll make sure it's shown to people who are most likely to. Very, very hard to accounts that began to follow that content. To the extent that the Explore page on Instagram, 80% of the posts on there recommended to you would feature pretty extreme bodybuilding physiques. This has been advertising.
If you're Instagram strategically, the ordinary user doesn't matter as much as the advertiser, unless you're thinking about them en masse. They need more ordinary users spending time on Instagram.
They write rules which are publicly available, and on the basis of those rules, content is completely removed by people from the site. But the other way they're thinking about reducing content that's harmful to people is by training machine learning models to predict what kinds of...
What's going on, Abby? So have a think of 10 different things that are important or special about you that nobody would know about unless you told them.
Abby's phone and that, it is a bit of a concern because you don't know who's on there, who she's messaging. So it makes you quite worried what she's doing and by herself and on her phone.
Thousands of these videos, people committing suicide who'd videoed the suicides. I don't know how them videos were uploaded. I didn't really look into it because I was so traumatised. And one of them, there was this woman, and people put on anymore because they didn't stop it in the first place.
Obviously, no social media will be the best solution, but you can't take somebody's phone off them forever, the social media off them forever. So I think certain guidelines need to be put in place to stop this.
I think we're starting to have a reckoning as a society for the power that Instagram holds over young people and over really all of us. In the last few years, employees have...
I worked at Facebook for approximately 2 years, starting in June of 2019. And it really struck me when I worked at Facebook that there were a number of systemic problems that I didn't believe Facebook. These problems in private, and that's part of why I came forward. We have to solve these problems together.
Facebook and Instagram have a responsibility to better understand the impacts that they're having on the world. But in my mind, that's not enough. What really needs to be...
Every single thing is different about me now because I've been through so much therapy. My whole life has changed. I've decided more recently to not edit any of my content, which I never really did before.
I hope that we will be able to find ways to feel interconnected in a positive way that benefits society at large. And I think that there are ways that social media platforms can do that. But
I was part of designing features and building features that are now used in the way they are. I can't completely disconnect from having worked on it.
I still love Instagram, and I really hope that it's able to sort of figure out how to navigate this space.
We need to demand the Instagram that we deserve, not the one that Facebook is giving us today.
And world-class quality.
Elecon was founded with a vision to always remain a step ahead. 70 years on, we remain leaps ahead.
From being one of the leading gear manufacturers in Asia with a pan-India and global network, we continue.
It's sad. You just want to make the painting for him. Sorry.
Fluid, dynamic, androgynous,
He's now at the forefront of a new generation of progressive choreographers who are drawing new art.
Change, population growth, and fractured supply chains. But might these shocks to our system actually be a catalyst for positive change?
We have to wake up and we have to feed the world. That's a big job.
Can farmers, scientists, and innovators?
World News with me, Tim Wilcox. Our top stories. On the eve of being sworn in as Australia's new Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese promises a new approach on climate change.
There is a change of government. There will be some changes in policy.
Hello, welcome to BBC World News. Australia's incoming Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, coral reefs and flooding has made Australia a byword for climate-fueled disruption. Well, Mr Albanese will be sworn in as Prime Minister on Monday before he heads to Tokyo for a meeting with the leaders of the US, Japan and India. He has signalled a major shift in climate change policy, saying Australia could become a renewable energy superpower.
Obviously, the Quad Leaders meeting is an absolute priority for Australia, and it enables us to send a message to the world that there is a change of government. There will be some changes.
To a new leadership, but also to a huge shift in the political landscape of their country. This was a bruising defeat for Scott Morrison and his governing Liberal National Coalition, with voters, especially women, turning as the center of their campaigning. But this is not going to be an easy task. Remember, Australia is a country that has been on the front line of climate disasters, whether that be the bushfires to fossil fuels. So to convince people, especially in the mining industry in regional Australia, that have been economically dependent on this industry is going to be difficult. But Anthony Albanese has called for change, has called for safe change. There are other things that the new Prime Minister will have to deal with, and that has to do with the engaging the rest of the world. He's going to be sworn in on Monday and then fly out to Tokyo to meet with President Joe Biden, to meet with the leaders of Japan and India.
Shaima Khalil there. A little earlier I spoke to Professor Leslie Hughes of the Climate Council, an independent climate change communications group, for more on the incoming leader's environmental agenda.
I think propped up by taxpayer money and subsidies, and we want to go forward in a more enlightened way. You know, Australia, as you said in your introduction, Australia has been highly dependent on the fossil fuel export industry, sort of climate action. But what we've been lacking is a regulatory framework, a policy framework at the federal government level. So the incoming Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is saying all the right things, and it's very careful in the lead up to the election to not do that, because Labor traditionally draws much of its support from people like workers in the fossil fuel industry. So I think it will. Hopefully we finally have a leader who is saying the right things, and we all have to be very supportive of moving in a new direction.
I just come back to squaring that circle. I think it was Labour back in 2020 mining and in dirty fuel production. So even if he's saying the right things, it's what he actually executes, surely, isn't it?
Well, yes, that's right. The Gillard government under Prime Minister Julia Gillard brought in a price on carbon. It wasn't really a tax. It was a price on carbon, as has been done in many countries around the world. It was extremely successful. It immediately resulted in to go up again. So it was clear that that was an effective mechanism. I doubt whether this incoming government will go down that path. But at least they recognise that the Australian community is sick of the climate wars. We're sick of being treated quite rightly as an international pariah on climate policy, and there has to be a new way forward. Now, yes, there are jobs in the mining industry, but in the coal industry and the gas industry.
Will now meet face-to-face on Tuesday at the Quad Summit in Japan. President Biden has arrived in Japan. He flew in from South Korea to begin the latest leg of his Asian tour. Here he is being, well, some of the other stories making the news this hour. Days of flooding and landslides in parts of Bangladesh and eastern India have affected millions of people, left more than 50 dead. Bangladesh's northeast region has seen some of the worst flooding for nearly 20 months once again. Last month, floods and mudslides killed more than 400 people. These two people have been killed in Canada as a tornado swept across Ontario and the city of Toronto. Sent us this report.
That will only happen when the conditions are right. The Ukrainians hope from their side, and I think all parties in this conflict accept that that's going to happen once a lot more fighting has taken place. Now, at the moment, that fighting is concentrated in the eastern artillery and overwhelming force, which eventually won them the ruins of Mariupol, still their tactic. A senior advisor to Ukraine's president says only force of arms will end this conflict.
Russia sells there is no other formula but to subdue Russia today through an end to the war on Ukraine's terms.
But for the last few days at least, it is the Russians who've been getting their way. In the south of the country, places like Irpin, where 2/3 of buildings were destroyed. Or Moshun, once a village, now a wasteland. Law for a further 90 days. And in reality, I think people here expect this conflict to go on for that duration and longer still. As I say, negotiations will take place at some point, but it's going to be when one side feels that they have lost on the battle.
Worldwide. Disease is usually only found in parts of West and Central Africa, but in the past 24 hours, Israel and Switzerland, and most recently Austria, have confirmed cases. At least 14 countries have reported outbreaks of the illness.
And Yemen, we face a formidable convergence of disease, drought, famine, and war, fueled by climate change, inequity, and geopolitical rivalries.
Were dreading. You know, if you remember when the Taliban seized power, it was a sight to see how these women journalists were questioning them on the roads, interviewing them inside the studios, and the Taliban promised that they will be, new, and they tried to resist for a day because on Saturday was the original deadline imposed by the Taliban. So they appeared on television without the face coverings, but the warnings were very clear from the Taliban Ministry of Vice and Virtue that they.
What sort of recriminations might he face?
Now, the television channels have been given a very clear message, fall in line. This is our rule because this is what we wanted to implement. They resisted for a while, but now we're warning them not to come in. And many of these activists were taken taken by some of the militant groups, even by the Taliban, kept under detention for a few weeks, and they were released later. So that protests have subsided. Now, if you look at the television channels, what options are limited, and that's why they're expressing their disappointment and anger.
Ember Hassan, thank you very much. The Duke and Duchess of Cornwall, Prince Charles and Camilla, will star in a special episode of the BBC.
When TV royalty meets real-life royalty. This was the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall visiting Albert Square back in March. But it wasn't just a social visit. We now know the royal...
We'll never hear the last of this.
On the live 40th anniversary episode of Coronation Street, he was seen in footage on a fictional news bulletin.
So we'll just give this one a good yes, do it.
Camilla is also familiar with Corrie. Here she is in 2010.
double the legal age of drinking. He went into a bar and was asked what he wanted, and he said, a cherry brandy, please. Now, it is International Day for Biological Diversity, an annual event dedicated to raising awareness around the world, the environment and make up the planet. The theme this year, Building a Shared Future for All Life, is chosen to support agenda at the forthcoming COP15 UN Biodiversity Conference. Well, Elizabeth Swanson is a bit about the environment where you live and the changes that have happened there.
Hi, thank you for having me here. So Amazon rainforest, well, I think it's what has inspired me and what has really shaped me, the land and the people here. From growing up in the rivers and playing in the rainforest. And even, I remember there was a time where...
Has that changed a lot in your young
Yes.
lifetime? So what has changed?
So what has changed since then, there has been multiple layers of change. But specifically from what I have experienced around my
maintain the environment. But tell us a little bit about some of the wood that's being cut, because I think it's your part of the forest where a lot of balsa wood is being cut and felled for use in wind turbines, which seems an irony.
Our Indigenous people all of a sudden participating in this, right? And that really reflects the internal conflicts, the internal needs of communities, the instability, the fragmentation of not only forests, but also people. So yeah, this part of the road, coming through that connection, electricity. And so oftentimes, Indigenous people are romanticized. The way that we used to live, especially in the area where I'm currently at, isn't as sustainable anymore. We don't have a lot of things like
that sounds like a completely historic era, but of course just in your lifetime. Elizabeth, I'm sorry, we are out of time, which means that we can't carry on speaking, but thank you for joining us here on BBC World News. More on that story on the website. From me and the team, thanks for watching.
Really, as we look at the weather picture into Monday, it is Kerala, Tamil Nadu that will see some of the heaviest falls of rain, but still some wet weather in Karnataka as well. The rain turning increasingly heavy and even torrential in places across the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Meanwhile, across central, so temperatures just easing back a little bit. A few heavy showers and thunderstorms across northern India could bring some hail in places as well. Now here's your outlook over the next few days. In Mumbai, we're dry, temperature about 33 degrees with hazy spells of sunshine.
Being at the heart of a live news show is challenging. So when events move quickly, you need to make sure you have the facts, and that's where experience counts. Having a good by a bloody war.
We follow Kalush Orchestra from the war-torn outskirts of Kyiv to their triumph in Turin. Our World, Eurovision, Ukraine's victory on BBC World News.
Weekly, here on BBC World News.
Prime Minister and Emperor Naruhito. Ukraine's government says it will not agree a ceasefire deal with Moscow that involves ceding any of its territory. The presidential advisor said making concessions would backfire on Ukraine because Russia would are determined to carry on working.
Global business news from the boardroom or grassroots. Aaron Hesselhurst cuts through the jargon to
The global economy on track. The man behind one of the biggest events in their calendar tells me restoring trust is a top priority. In many parts of the world, wages are rising as companies struggle to find enough staff. But with growing warnings of a recession, the world can keep a lid on inflation without derailing economic growth. rent or mortgage payments. Well, all of this is thanks to soaring inflation, which was rising because of the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic and has been made worse by the war in Ukraine. Some influential voices are now warning a big recession. $1,000, it's the starting price for the membership of the World Economic Forum, which you need to get an invite. The most expensive membership? That's $600,000. That lets 4 people attend. But you can get a 5th invite included in that.
About things like climate change, corporate governance, racial and gender imbalance. They pledge all kinds of progressive change, and then very little happens. If this meeting never happened, the world would stay pretty much as it is. The real function of organized to get a piece of the action, it's really an elaborate charade that's about maintaining the status quo under the banner of improving the world.
But with war raging in Ukraine and the fallout being felt all around the world,
support of the world, and participation in the Davos Forum is one of the best opportunities for that.
So, some important people do seem to see a lot of value in Davos. It certainly comes at a time of huge challenges for the global economy. So,
one, of course, is the horrible war which we see in Ukraine, the aggression of Russia on Ukraine, and all its repercussions and implications, which are far-reaching. And for this reason, we have given to the biggest global health disaster for the last 100 years. We have the global economy with great concerns because the global economy, and we may speak later about it, is certainly out of balance. The new and disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence.
Klaus, in your opinion, is the war in Ukraine, the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, is all of that stopping the leaders of the global economy?
And as I said already, since a long time, the world is not sufficiently thinking in strategic terms. And particularly now, global decision-making is very much characterized by put ourselves in, which means too high inflation, too low growth, too much debts. What is actually the exit strategy? The same, of course, is true for the war in Ukraine. What exit strategies, problem, and so on? We have a very strong Ukrainian presence in Davos. I hope that people become aware of the danger of large.
Join me. Thanks for your time. Good luck with everything, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Aaron. See you in Davos.
So, while some of the richest people discuss the big problems affecting millions of us in Davos, what is the impact of all of this change on living standards around the world? Standards. So I've been speaking to the big boss of Manpower Group. It's one of the world's biggest employment agencies, and last year it found work for 2 million people in 75 countries. Jonas Priesing, my friend, thank you so much for your time. Jonas, let's start with this seeing in the employment market at the moment.
Well, thanks, Aaron. What you're seeing here is a continued, very strong labor market across the world, where we've bounced back from the difficulties during the pandemic, and employers is at a record high, or at least very close to a record high across the world.
And why is that, Jonas?
So some of the reasons we're seeing this very strong demand is also a very strong surge in demand for products and services.
Does it mean wages will just keep going up, which is part of this cycle causing rising prices around the world?
Well, the wage inflation we're seeing right now, we an anomaly to see labor markets this tighten this quickly for so many people in a uniform way across the world. We still believe that we will see a wage inflation that is abating and
a genuine cost of living crisis for hundreds of millions of people. I mean, it feels like it's a problem that's only getting worse, and I'm just wondering, can that ever be addressed, or has the horse already bolted?
A lot of the globalization, if you step back from globalization and said, has it been beneficial for the world and for the population at large? And the answer to that is unequivocally yes. But along with the yes comes the caveat that we've seen significant polarization of the workforce between the haves and the have-nots, principally driven by access to skills to take advantage of globalization and more usage of technology.
Yes,
lofty projections for 2022 and 2023. So the fact that it's coming down doesn't mean that we're tipping over into recession, but undoubtedly the effects of very strong wage inflation and is driving.
A real pleasure, my friend, having you with us. Thanks for your time, and I'd love to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, with food and energy prices soaring, a shortage of workers and warnings of a recession, I speak to the boss of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund.
Fiction, when lies actually spread faster than facts.
I understand the consequences of my decision. And one of the consequences of my decision was not going to Australia, and I was prepared not to go.
I have to work twice as hard for half as much.
BBC.
This is a residential building. There's a real sense that the danger, the conflict is coming closer, and a feeling here now that nowhere is safe.
Welcome back. This is Talking Business Weekly with me, Aaron Heselhurst. So we've heard about the widespread challenges facing the global economy, rising prices, stretched supply chains and worker shortages. Having you join me, thank you for your time. Kristalina, can we start with this? Because just before the war in Ukraine started, you warned the world economy was facing, and I quote, a tough obstacle course this year because of the ongoing impact of coronavirus, the pressures of rising prices and growing government debt levels. But since then, Kristalina, we've got another major COVID lockdown in China. Look, I'm just wondering if the war in Ukraine is an obstacle too far for the global economy.
It did downgrade our projections for growth for this year because of Omicron from 4.9 to 4.4%. And now with the war hitting Ukraine very severely, 43 countries. This is 86% of the world. And if you ask yourself, who are the 14% that are lucky, they tend to be oil exporting countries concerned about uncertainty. We have rarely seen uncertainty so profound.
Your forecast is down to 3.6% for the global economy. Do you think you're going to have to cut that number again?
Look, not out of question. Two, we are very concerned about the importance for central banks to decisively counter inflation. They have to do it, but as they do it, what would be the impact on growth? What would be put the floor under the world economy that was rattled by the pandemic? Just to finish on a more positive note, we have to remember that our projections for this year are still for positive growth.
All of those risks you highlight has made
uncertainty so thick that it would be irresponsible to make a definitive projection. What I can say is that inevitably there will be countries falling into recession on energy imports. So we say to our members, be very careful how much you spend and what for you spend. There are two priorities. One, the very poor people damaged by the war.
We know the work of the IMF is all about prosperity, making people's lives better. But boy, Kristalina, it feels like living standards are only going to fall this year in much of the world. I mean, what are the consequences of that? I mean, we've already seen civil unrest in Sri Lanka. Could we see more of that elsewhere?
Oh, definitely, yes. Remember 2019, the year before the pandemic, it was the year of unrest and a sense of exclusion, and also decisions being taken that may be good decisions, but they are not supported by people. People are not brought on board. And I think if we are to learn any lesson from
thing that the war has highlighted is the global food security. We prices at record highs. Kristalina, how does the world make up the shortfall, loss from Ukraine and Russia as well, to make sure everyone has enough to eat?
There is a situation in which countries hold on food more than they need and create all kinds of barriers for food to move from one place to another. Two, we ought to focus more on agricultural productivity, not only play a positive role. I understand they need to feed their people. They have 1.4 billion of them, but let's all act in a collaborative manner, because of the 2-3 months that are in front of us, there is a recognition that the Ukrainian economy is the most devastated from the war, shrinking by 40% probably this year, and significant financing, preferably grants, because as you noted, the loan burden is significant. It may be necessary at some point this loan burden to be reviewed and revisited.
App. You can also follow me on Twitter. Tweet me. I'll tweet you back. You can get me at BBC Aaron. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Excellence. With our new business class suites, where your privacy is paramount and your experience is second to none. Sit back, relax in.
We've even seen some frost around the Great Plains over the weekend. Now, heading into Monday, that front will be bringing some very heavy thundery showers across parts of the southeast. So the Carolinas, Georgia, parts of Florida seeing some big thunderstorms, potentially with some damaging wind gusts and maybe even a bit of hail mixed in as well. Rain easing off across central areas of Chile. Might see some damp weather reaching Santiago for a time, but colder air follows. And we'll see some sleet and snow showers even getting down to sea level across the south of Chile. Across the northwest of Europe, temperatures 18 in both Paris and London, cooler than recent days. Eventually, we'll start to see that torrential rain clearing away from eastern areas of South Africa, particularly the Durban area, where we could be looking at a nasty flooding event at the moment. The heatwave continues to ease across Pakistan and northwestern areas of India. Temperatures at their highest probably reaching the mid-40s rather than the high 40s or even low 50s. Rains continue to be torrential across Myanmar and Thailand and other. Moving its way into Adelaide. Ahead of that, Melbourne stays fine on Tuesday.